Hello, Internet Land. It is Renee in LA, your SoCal gal. And today we are bringing you information about property management, which is a hot topic, not only for agents, but also for investors. And here on this YouTube channel, we talk about both. Now, this session is going to be a little bit of evergreen information. So it's going to live on here. Chloe's going to talk a little bit about, what it is to be a property manager, the expectations for people that pay for property management, and specifically where she's located. So she is in the Southern California area, closer to San Diego. But I think, Chloe, what you're going to talk about a little bit could go across the board, right? Because we have all different kind of eyes and ears that are going to land on this channel. And we want to talk a little bit more of like kind of generic, for property management. So Chloe, you and I are actually friends. We've known each other for about a decade. And you got yourself into this crazy business. So you have Bridge House Property managers, I can say in plural, right?
Yep.
And please, have at it. Introduce yourself a little bit more, kind of what got you into this, because we didn't come at our friendship from real estate. We came out of the leadership program that we were in, and all of a sudden I was excited to see that you're doing this and how long you've been doing it. So please, have at it.
Yeah. Thanks, Renee. Thanks for having me on. I'm really excited. I really love talking about property management because, so first let me back up. So my name is Chloe Brown. I'm the co-owner and founder of Bridge House Property Managers. We're a long-term residential property management company in San Diego. And like Renee mentioned, 100% across the board, things do apply. Yes, there's rules and regulations in different states and certain different cities, but kind of across the board, to understand the logistics of management and all that kind of good stuff, I think is just beneficial, whether you're a real estate agent looking to partner with a property manager to support your clients, or you're an investor considering property management, or what you should expect, like, is this how it goes or not? So I love talking about it. I think it's really beneficial. And so to answer your question in terms of how this got started, was that I actually was personally looking for a property manager. So I had started kind of going down the road of flips and some buy and holds in San Diego. And that's kind of what that was kind of like my new path. And so I started to invest in properties. Some of them I started to flip. And then there was a particular property that we were converting from a single family detached garage to 4 units.
Wow.
So then the quest came to find, because we weren't going to do that. We weren't going to manage the properties. We were going to go and find more. So then the quest was, great. So now we're going to start interviewing, talking to real estate agents, like, hey, who can you refer? Who do you work with? And then speaking with some of them local property management companies directly. So what we found out was we just didn't really feel like any of these companies, and then really none of those kind of industry pros could say to us, hey, 100%, this is the go-to, talk to them. So I managed Bridge House with my sister. And so we kind of both looked at each other and said, instead of picking from, the best of just what didn't seem like the best pool and what our expectations were, let's start our own thing. So we really had to decide, like, hey, are we going to do this? And we did. And that's from our own personal need. And when we saw for ourselves, well, hey, we're not seeing this in the market here in San Diego, then, maybe there's other people. So that's really kind of where it started, how it started, and what really got us kind of our wheels turning, and how we can support, investors, as well as we have a ton of real estate agent partners providing just a lot of value for them across the board. And so that was about 4 years ago. And we're now managing almost close to 400 properties, doors right now.
Doors, yeah. Wow, that's a lot. And so you said single family, I want to make sure I heard you correctly. You said single family residence. So just for the audience to recap, are you not doing apartment buildings? Because that could be easily more contained, right? When you say doors, or are you doing basically single family, 400 single family homes?
So we do multifamily, single family. We do that across the board. We definitely do. But what we specialize in and what we do exclusively is the long term. So we're really working with people that know, hey, this is a property that I'm an investor. I know that I want a resident to be in there for a 12-month minimum. And if there's an opportunity to renew, great, let's do that. So that's our lane, is that long-term 12-month minimums. Yeah.
So just to be clear again for the audience, because there will be a lot of investors or for agents who are wanting to kind of get into the investor sector. So just to educate on that distinction is when you say 12 months, and this may be obvious, but this is the kind of stuff I don't want people to step over, because I'm all about actionable steps. I'm all about, being in action around the listening, right? So when you're saying 12 months, that is literally someone that's coming in, whether it's a family, whether it's a single person, what have you, coming in and saying, I am going to sign a 1-year lease, basically a 12-month lease, right? Versus a lot of the audience that we do have we would consider short-term rentals. So that's not what you're doing, and you don't plan on doing that. That's not even in your wheelhouse.
Totally clear. Yeah, that's 100% accurate. And it really is a different beast. When you're looking then in short-term or midterm or vacation rentals, and I get calls all the time like, hey, we want to do this. People think maybe it's the same, but it really is a different business model, because you're having guests come in and out. We're, screening residents. We're having them sign leases. We're doing background checks. We're confirming that these people qualify to live here, versus a guest maybe in a short term, they can come and stay, and you expect that they're going to leave when the checkout date comes. And as some people know, and kind of hearing the buzz in the news in California and whatnot, sometimes that doesn't happen. And now you're kind of dealing with that, kind of that situation.
Yeah. I mean, we won't get on that rabbit hole, but I know there's one famous one right here in LA where some lady just checked in. I don't know if it's technically Airbnb as a brand, but it was a short-term rental and never left. It was like the guest from hell. And I think it's been a couple of years. Yeah.
Yeah. So we don't traffic in that. We're really looking at, hey, every month as an investor, you can expect X amount in your bank account. You're, counting on that cash flow. There is a lot of stability. So there's no vacancy time. The only vacancy time that you're going to see is between residents. And there's really great things that we do to minimize all that good stuff. But yeah, that's really our focus, and yeah, it's really benefiting the investor community here in San Diego.
And so I'm going to call it full service. I don't know if that's the exact right terminology. So people that want to do business with you, after this, and they say, hey, I really align with Chloe. I like her vibe. I like what she's saying. I'm going to make the next step. I'm going to make the phone call. That you can basically be hands off. I mean, a lot of people that own properties, they just want to stand there with their hand out every month and get a check. They do not want to be bothered. They're either doing flips or buy and holds or, whatever they're doing, right, as an exit strategy. They have a life, and they don't want to get that 3 o'clock in the morning toilet phone call, which is like the running joke of property management. But and this is a little bit naive on my behalf, because I'm not as steeped in this world. But what is a question that I'm not asking? Like, what would the expectation be, and what is a differentiator for you if someone would be getting that nightmare call and they finally want to say, I'm going to pay the percentage to have a property manager handle this?
Yeah. I mean, I think that in itself is a basic but really great question, because there are so many companies that maybe provide some kind of a la carte service, or you're in a tiered. So if you pay X, you're in this tier, and then Y, you're in this tier, and Z when you're in this tier. For us, we really want and really excel with working with people, whether you're an investor or just a property owner, however, that shakes out, rental property owner. We're 100% from A to Z. We handle everything. I mean, really, on the contrary, it's almost like we don't want you to be involved, because really that's why you're paying us.
Yeah.
So from the very beginning, the most important thing is finding great residents. So making sure the screenings are happening, making sure that things like meeting people at the tours in person. That's something that I think differentiates us. I know some companies are doing that, but with technology and certain lock boxes and, kind of in general in real estate, that the rental market has kind of adopted that, like lockbox and like let people come in and check it out.
Yeah.
But I I and my team really feel that having that personal interaction with any prospective residents, it not only minimizes like the scam, it really allows us to create a personal relationship so that when they do call their office, they remember that they spoke with Jack, my leasing gal, or Arian, my leasing gal. They know there is some kind of personal touch. And so from, that whole process, screening, background checks, all within California Fair Housing, I always kind of give the 2 cents to people that are self-managing. Do you know specifically in California, those 21 things about discriminating in fair housing? If you don't, and you just don't like someone or you don't have a process in place, so you could be opened up for liability in a lawsuit. Very, and we know all those things. We have all of our protocols and our processes and how we screen. They're publicized. So we can go to court and it's, here for X amount of years, this is our process. This is how we do things. So from using the accurate lease agreements, making sure that all the documentation's giving, move-in inspections. And I highlight certain things because we also inherit properties. A property or an individual might call me and say, hey, I've been working with a company, I want to transition. And I can't tell you how many times it's just things that didn't get done or move-in inspections or things that are missing that make it difficult to enforce anything. So that's, from that process all the way through that, 3 a.m. call, it's going to our emergency line to, lease enforcement, lease renewals, rent increases, rent collection, all the maintenance.
Yeah. Wow.
You don't touch or deal with any of that. I don't call you and say, well, hey, which plumber do you want to use? I have the vetted, interviewed, preferred plumbing companies that we use because they are a representation of Bridge House.
Yeah.
So it's really the types of rental property owners that like our service and our style is the ones that want to be hands-on. They see, oh, great, there's my money, direct deposit. We don't even do the checks. It's like completely hands off. And then obviously we're available if you need something. We're not just, communication is one of the biggest things that we found when we were looking for a company that was like kind of lacking. So that's something that is always in the forefront for us. But usually things are swimming. If you don't hear from us, it's because things are great. So
like no news is good news, right? Even though you want some news, because the feedback I've always gotten, at least as an agent investor, is now people feel like they're managing the management. That's a big thing.
100%. You have a question or a question about your statement. It's like our team is designed for what is your specific need and what do you need, and that expert person in maintenance. Your property manager in terms of your statement, or you have questions about how this financing shakes out. You have a person. The residents have a specific person to contact so that you are not managing us. If you have to manage us, for us, that's a red flag that we're not doing our job, and maybe we drop the ball, and if we can't correct it, then maybe another company is a better fit for you. And there's certain things that we don't. We like to overpromise and exceed that. We're like, hey, we're going to do all these great things. And then people are like, wow, my other company didn't do that. And then go beyond, really.
And that's why I have you on here, because yes, we're friendly, but I also, we all have our own reputations, right? So we want to highlight people that we know have integrity, that we know that can deliver, because we do want to scratch each other's back, and we want to make sure that, the client obviously has gotten serviced well. And so, yeah, it's just, I know that of you. And the beautiful thing about you is that first of all, I wish you were closer to LA. Selfishly.
I don't. No, I'm just kidding.
Maybe you'll have like a part two.
And I say that jokingly because I do have clients here in San Diego that ask me, hey, I have property in LA. Will you guys, and because for us, I could say, okay. And then I could kind of figure out, who's up there, but it's really that quality and that I'm not going to take on a market if it's not set up.
Yeah.
Not yet, at least.
I'm putting a bug in your ear.
I
But,
get it.
that's just expansion, and in the right and
Yeah.
perfect time, you will. So you
Yeah.
said you're right at that sort of 4-year mark or 4-year cusp, and,
Yeah.
that's a good amount of time to get some wheels going, and, people kind of come and they go, but then you do have some folks that are committed and, bought into the vision and should be,
Yeah.
staying for a little longer so you can actually feel comfortable expanding, because you can't be in 2 places at once. And I'm having my own growth
100%.
spurt, so it just takes time. It could take a year, to go through,
Oh,
like,
yeah.
get your systems in order, get the momentum going, and then, onboard people and go
Oh,
through
yeah.
them and go through the SOPs, right? Standard operating principles and all the expectations. And it's a work in progress. So, the fact that you're on your 4th year is like probably right in and around there.
Yeah.
Anyway, you'll get to it or not, but that's
Yeah.
me. So yeah, I'm curious, property management, it's interesting because as much as I've been a real estate agent now for almost 19 years, I can't believe I'm saying that. Most of who I've traveled with are investors that are sort of 5 units and under. My career has taken a change where I am doing a little bit more commercial just by virtue of what people's wants and needs are. But even then, I will partner because it's a lot. It's a different lane, 5+ apartment buildings, all the things, mixed usage. Are you finding that most investors would be considered, this is not a less than, but would be considered smaller investors in the commercial or investor world, which is kind of like a 1 to 4 unit?
Mhm.
Or is that just because that's your niche? Or what are you seeing at the landscape of what's coming in your direction?
It's kind of across the board. I mean, I get calls with someone that has never even trafficked at all in this, and they're seeing pockets of San Diego that they want to start and they want to invest in maybe a 2-bed, 2-bath condo. Great.
Right.
Let's see how that goes. And then they want to grow their portfolio. And then I have clients that, they have 30 doors in San Diego, and they're, maybe they're older and it's something that they've been doing for years and years, and they've accumulated it. It's been really great. And now they're calling me because they're like, hey, I'm getting up there in age, and it's very cute. I think about my client and he's like, my wife's just, really going to just kind of keep giving me crap if I don't hire someone.
Yeah.
To people that are seasoned and maybe they have 2 or 3. So, I mean, if I think about kind of the last few people, I think a lot of them are, they're growing their families. So they've been where they're at and now they're upgrading, but they don't want to give up this great property in San Diego because the rents and where they got their interest rate and all of that is really what we're seeing, is that people are ready to let go, have that be their piggy bank, and then they're going to, go purchase something larger for their growing family.
And I even just want to say this as a side note too, right? So thank you for answering that question, because you and I live in California, we do business in California. And as far as 2 things, California is not known as an investor friendly state.
Mm-hmm.
And nor is it something that people necessarily are coming into. There's a lot of going out of, including post-pandemic. The politics right now are a little sideways. It's 2024, however long this video lives. I wouldn't say that California and that for the rest of the country is like shining. But the interesting thing that I'm noticing is it just hasn't stinking slowed down. So as far as I love, talking to property managers, I mean, you're my girl, right? But I've clearly talked to just property managers in general. Sometimes I call them and they're licensed agent. And then they go, oh, but really I operate as a property manager, right? So I never exactly always know who I'm talking to. It's not just a realtor that sells pretty houses. Anyway, are you seeing, like, I know you do more of that San Diego, kind of that area of SoCal, but are you seeing a steady uptick or more people buying? I mean, it's a little bit of a part 2 to that question, where maybe people have their 5 duplexes and that's still considered small, small investment. And now they're going to buy a big apartment, maybe 60 doors or something like that, a big apartment complex. Are you seeing that kind of transition and wealth and equity, if you will, wealth and equity, staying within the state? Or are you seeing people say, hey, I'm going to cash out and I'm out. I'm going to take what you just said, which was, I want to provide for my family, ... Is that still now in California's current state the case? Or are they fleeing the state?
Yeah, that's a great question. And San Diego is, and I have investors call me and ask me like, well, how's the market? People are always going to come to San Diego.
It's a great city. It
I mean,
is.
they just are. And so it's a little bit of a loaded question. There are people that have left and that they might, and it's not slowing down. So those people maybe are leaving, but then you got, all these mega companies too that are bringing their staff to San
Mm.
Diego. They're expanding their warehouses and their office into San Diego. So no, I mean, I definitely don't see a slowdown. And maybe I'm a little bit, I don't want to say biased, but because I only traffic in that world
Yeah.
of my clients telling me what they're doing. But I feel like for every one person, it almost seems like two more, or, things I would say in the rental market right after COVID just exploded in terms of
Mm.
the competition and how many people were looking for properties. I mean, it got
Wow.
insane.
Okay.
And so there was, 2021 in April, I mean, the rental market hit the high.
Mm-hmm.
It was like
Remember that?
you could price anything at any price, and you would get people. I mean, we had people coming to our office, like finding out personal things about us, like bringing us like our dog's gift basket.
What?
I'm not joking.
How
Yeah.
were they going on your How they find that out? Were they going on your
I
Instagram or
mean, I
something?
think I think something, maybe the about us on our website had
Oh,
like a little blurb about what we like to do in our free time, or
yeah.
someone
Yeah.
had like, their dog, whatever. So,
Wow.
and we're kind of seeing that, or we were seeing that kind of over these past holidays. And then some of those properties that are now turning over, now we're, kind of coming up on those 2-3-ish years and thinking, okay, what's that's going to look like? And people are still paying a premium. I mean, the owners are like, hey, we want to push it because we really want to minimize vacancy time. So
Yeah.
we're looking at how can we stay competitive. But now we're seeing really those single family homes in San Diego, people are paying a premium and paying $200 or $300 over
Wow.
what we kind of thought. Maybe not, maybe there's not a ton of traffic, but there are people and they're calling and they want to know, and they're, CEOs and superintendents of schools and those kinds of people
Mhm.
that maybe they're not ready to buy. So that's what, and I think that maybe that kind of little dip, I would say in single family homes, that doesn't even exist. That dip is just not even there.
Wow.
The ones and the twos, those are a little bit harder to fill. I would
Mhm.
say now
Mhm.
it's not impossible. You have to just be more competitive with pricing.
Yeah.
So but it's back up. I mean, it was just kind of evening out like pre-COVID, like what was normal.
Yeah.
People
Well,
were
yeah.
coming in
There you go.
2021. Now they're like, I have to lower my price. I don't understand how that goes. It's like, well, we have to explain to them this is what happened at that time, and different areas change, like downtown
Yeah.
has changed dramatically, and things kind of shift, but it's really not impacted, and people are buying investment property every day. And
So interesting. Yeah. And that's why I asked, so really in short, and I know you're in the trenches and you're just one person and you're like kind of in one neighborhood with
yeah,
certain types of property. So it's not meant to kind of put your back against the wall. You're not an economist. It's none of that. But I like asking the in the trenches questions. And so that was a very valid answer. So for instance, right, if anybody else is outside of California or maybe outside of the San Diego area and is uncertain, and you don't have all day to educate people, here's an in the trenches, right, answer
yeah,
is that people still want to live in San Diego. There's a lot of stability in San Diego. The Navy is there, the Navy SEAL. There's that, because I grew up in Washington D.C., so I know how stable the government can be.
yeah,
Unlike Los Angeles, like it's more entertainment, it's flighty, it's whatever.
yeah,
Got that stability there in San Diego, and it's been there such a long time that even if people do come and go, there's knowing that the Navy resides there, and all the travel. Well, I'm sure during COVID, for the in and out of the city of San Diego, that's why the airport's right downtown.
yeah,
For all the travel and conventions and so forth, that probably took a hit. But anyway, just to say that it is a gorgeous city. It's like 70 degrees year round. It's unbelievable. It's one of my favorite cities. If it wasn't so meshed in Los Angeles, I would move to San Diego, or maybe I would. Maybe you'll lure me down
yeah.
there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, hello, we can do anything now. I feel like remote. I mean, we're doing an interview online, which
I
is great.
know. I know. I still get
Yeah.
stuck a little bit, but yeah, no, and it's only 2.5 hours away. And you get, speaking of short-term rentals, I know that's not what you're doing, right? But like I could get a short-term rental for a
100%.
month, 2 months, 3 months, and just park myself in
Yep.
San Diego, and not driving back and forth up the five, home,
Yep.
that kind of thing. So yeah,
And
it
I
is
know
a very
those
different
people
world.
too.
Wow.
So I know, any of those people, if anyone's listening and they want to compare, because a lot of the times it's like, well, hey, what do rents look like long term versus short term, considering the turnover and the vacancy rate. And that's something that, I have a partner that does vacation rentals. That's what he does. And sometimes people call me and we do that kind of analysis, hey, with long term, this is what it looks like over here with Bridge House. And then over here with Coastline, this is what this looks like. So I have partnerships with, companies that are doing that. So if there is anyone listening and they're either they're curious or they're very interested in that short term, I have the people that specialize and do that kind of stuff.
Perfect. So you are more of a one-stop shop there that people could call Bridge House property managers. And that's what I want for you too, so that people don't go, oh, in the beginning of this, you said, well, we don't do short-term, but you're a hub in the wheel. And then you know how to get the question.
100%. I mean,
Okay.
I know 100 probably different types of people that can help anyone in San Diego. I have a huge network of professionals, and knowing those people that have that integrity, have that reputation, and that are doing a great job, because they're also my partners in some way or another. So they're a resource, and happy to share all that with anybody that's looking for something.
That's brilliant. Thank you for being so generous with that, because it is your valuable time and it's the time that you spent creating those relationships. But someone can just call you and, I'll put your contact information in the notes. You can say your contact information at the end. I want to switch it a little bit to the realtors and then also speak to the investors. We were kind of talking like what maybe the expectation would be for an investor. Is there anything else you wanted to say on that? Or is there something that I didn't ask you that would be important, that if you're an investor and you're doing some kind of buy and hold, that's your purpose? And maybe a question could also be, I'm asking one now, is a pitfall. So if you don't line itemize a property manager, whether it's Chloe or not, if you don't line itemize for a property management, by the way, there's probably sort of like a basic statistics, percentage number that you could give out, to the audience, to just put that in the line itemization. If they didn't think about it, or they're trying to be a handyman, or they're 6 months into it and their wife's kicking them in the shins or whatever,
or they're kicking themselves in the shins.
It's going to cost me another 15%. They may as well know upfront what that is. So what might the expectation be financially? What does that look like maybe as a percentage? And then is it just all peace of mind, or what is the real expectation from a full service concierge property manager that you can fill in the blanks, aside a little bit more from what you said in the beginning? I mean, like a psychology of, maybe it's not a different answer, but just want to make sure they heard it again.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you can find and research all different types, like I said, in tier forms, or this service or that service. But if you're really looking for a company to take on that understands the changing laws, especially in California, a place like LA, that rent control, and you're dealing with a lot of cities have their individual changing processes, that if you forgot a deadline to give a resident some kind of notification, that now when they move out, you have to pay them 2 months rent for, relocation.
Wow.
Or if you're working with a property management company, that the expectation is that they're up on those changing laws. They are sending those notices, and you may be exempt, but if it got missed, so I'm trying so there's, the bottom line is there's so many different, resources that you can go to. You can pay a flat fee. You could pay between 7 and 12% management.
Okay.
Probably fine. So what we do is we're between 8 and 10. We're right in the middle. We, depending on if you have multiple properties, we're going to manage in the 8%. If you have like just one single, we're in the 10%, and that's a gross monthly rent. And I would say, for myself as an investor and as a property manager and owner of a company, my expectation is that I don't have to think or deal with anything that has to do with my property unless it's over a certain like dollar amount for maintenance. And I don't want to get into the nitty gritty of that,
Yeah.
but that's, we're not just spending your money and whatever. We're not doing that. We have processes and protocols that really work for people that are investors. They don't want to be bothered. So that I would say from an investor standpoint, that expectation would be, know that if you're not getting the level of service that you would expect, that someone's really handling your investment property and giving you that peace of mind that you're not involved, you don't need to hear anything about the tenants, then my recommendation would be to maybe interview a few other companies and see if there's a better fit. Yeah, that would be my expectation.
That makes sense. And you know what? Honestly, guys, whomever's listening to this, it's like, sure, do it for posterity almost, to make sure that you cross all the T's and dot all the I's, and maybe some of it's a personality thing. But what I'm really hearing is the scariest is you don't know what you don't know. And so a company like yours, who's really, really looking out for their client intentionally, not just because you should, but you have to, because guess where all the fingers are going to get pointed, if a ball drops, right? And they have to pay the 2 months relocation fee is what you said. It's one small example, probably in comparison to what it could be. I mean, we're all out here kind of having to be experts in everything because there's just so much access to information. But when you take something like what you mentioned, some of the rules, if you will, are you telling the client, are you telling the investor, if you will, are you telling the client that, like, hey, we did this thing, and maybe I wouldn't even know what that is, but hey, we did it. So now I can be empowered to know about it. And of course I feel comfortable with what you're doing. But again, it's back to like, that is the scariest thing for owners, and to making a commitment to property management is most of the time they do the bare minimum, which is what I heard. That's not a slant or a judgment. It's just what I hear as feedback. And so now you're talking about a whole breadth of potential legalities, not just a 3 a.m. toilet clogged call, that you're saying, hey, client, we did this. And now you know what that thing is as the client.
Yeah.
I mean, that's huge. I mean,
100%. Yeah. 100%. And I think that, sometimes people call me and maybe their first question is, well, what are your fees?
Yeah.
And a lot of the time, from my perspective, it's, what is your relationship to the value of your property?
Yeah.
Is it, can I get the cheapest? And I'm very transparent. And I say, listen, we're not the cheapest company. And we don't just, collect rent and fix toilets.
Yeah.
We're dealing with the relationships with the residents, so that, and not only from that personal side, make sure they're set up, making sure that things are working, but really from the liability side, because that's the biggest thing. Or in terms of speed of repair, that's something that we are constantly looking at in terms of our maintenance department, and really tightening everything up. Because sometimes, I give this example where someone might call me and say, hey, I'm not happy where I'm at. And I ask, well, I want to get a little bit of a sense of what's happening. And they say, bottom line, communication. And my thought and my question to them is always to consider, if you're the property owner. So, and we see really our residents and our property owners as clients. It's two in the same. But you as the client that has hired the property manager, they're not getting back to you. Do you think they're getting back to your tenant?
Right.
Your tenant has a leaky, something leaking under the sink, that if they would have just dealt with it, maybe it was a simple fix, but now it's 1 or 2 weeks. Now you're dealing with reconstruction, remediation, mold, all of the things that, if you don't have set up in a way that is going to get things handled, with maybe you pay a flat rate for your property to get managed, or the very bare minimum bottom line, you really can't expect that that's going to be handled in that way. And those are conversations that I have, and I tell people, like, listen, if you want to be involved and you want to have 100%, we're not the company, but it's not the bare minimum anymore. You really are taking on all aspects of the management, unless, it's very transparent that you do this, but you don't do this, which I think a lot of the times the expectation,
Yeah.
it's just clear.
That's what's interesting, because you're saying it's not clear and it's not set up as an expectation. Just to break down some of the semantics, some of the words that you were choosing, because I'm going back to, the word on the street. And I wish I didn't have to speak that way, but, realtors have the same reputation, right? It's like we're constantly sort of this uphill battle.
Yeah.
But I want to make a distinction that I think for the listeners, that if you're really even contemplating getting property management, you have a property manager and you're in an upset, you have to really decide what it is that you're looking for, because I think there's an assumption that, homes are just going to do well until something breaks. And I've seen that enough times with my realtor hat on, not so much my investor hat on, right? But when I sell something, like I sell a home to someone and the buyer expectation, they're always fighting and kicking and screaming for like a request for repairs on a sewer line. And I might go back in 6 months or a year and say like, hi, I haven't seen you in a minute. How's the sewer line going? And they're like, oh no, we bought this 52-inch television. It's like they got their credit to fix the sewer line, but it's so not a sexy conversation. So back to, you are not in sexy conversations. You're in matter of fact, let's keep ourselves away from litigious conversations, right? And so
all
stuff
the
people
time.
don't want to do. It's like, we don't
time.
want to deal with it. We just want the shiny, pretty things. So what I'm proposing to the listener is, if you feel like maybe it's all you can afford, so let's just preface it with that. However, if you're really going to get in the game of building wealth and you're going to use the avenue of real estate, you must spend money to make money. And albeit an inanimate object, it's a home, whatever, the condo, commercial, we're just going to call it, a property. Yeah. It's a property, right? It's an inanimate object, but there is things about it that kind of live and breathe, right? The systems move. It's like if you have a vacant home for too long, the systems rot. If you don't take care of the systems rot. And so make sure that if you're okay with, look, I just need a plumber to come over, that is not property management. What Chloe is proposing is, particularly in a lot of the nation's bigger cities, which is where people want to buy. I mean, with all respect to smaller towns and smaller areas and homesteading and living off the land and being outside on the city limits and all of that, that's not where most people dwell. Where most people dwell are in major metropolitan cities in this country. There's probably 5. I don't know. Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, San Diego, that's LA, that's 5 right there. Then you got like Chicago, Miami, Houston, New York. Most of these states, New York, the blue states are the ones that are not as landlord friendly. However, we're beyond that. If you're going to decide to, get into a red state and be a landlord and have more landlord friendly, great. But maybe your cap rates are, a little lower, like in a blue state, because people want to be here, like California. You've got to know what you're saying yes to, because it is so litigious out here. And so I hear it less of like old school property manager with kind of like a plumber guy, like almost a handyman, an on-site handyman is kind of how I think old school property management has been thought of.
Yeah.
And really what you need to be listening for is almost like a legal ease partner in your biggest assets that you're owning.
Yeah. I mean, 100%. And if you're considering, managing your own property, you also have to consider, you mentioned the systems, right? So it's the systems in the property and all these things. The biggest thing is now you're dealing with this variable being your tenants. So your property could be this and that and that, and and a tenant knows that you are the landlord and you own the property. I bet, without any question of a doubt, they're going to ask you for things that they would never ask a property management company. And are you going to know what you have to do or don't have to do? Are they going to, do you need to set up boundaries to make sure that you're not changing light bulbs on a Saturday morning or Sunday night, or, changing light bulbs, period, or batteries. And I make these jokes because I have my family in LA that self-manage, and it just makes me laugh, or like long tenant emails. And I've we've seen some things, and we deal with a lot. I mean, we've probably over 1,000 tenants plus.
Wow.
With.
That's a lot of personalities. That's really what that is. It's not just
and there's just certain things that we don't even get because it becomes almost like a psychological thing.
Yeah.
Where they're going to interact very differently with a company, like a Bridge House Property Managers versus Chloe Brown's my landlord, and she stops by sometimes, kind of friend or not thing, that sometimes they get kind of funny. So that my 2 cents about, if you're going to self-manage, making sure that you have all those, everything set up too. If you're on vacation, you're in Hawaii, you're like enjoying yourself. Awesome. Wonderful. Your tenant calls you because now there's like a major pipe leak and you live in an HOA and it's an HOA community.
Oh, and that's happens when you go on vacation. You either make more money on vacation or you get more problems on vacation. That's the rule of the universe.
And I honestly have these conversations with prospective owners, and not from I'm trying to scare you, but from, listen, if you're considering and we're kind of weighing those options, what is your time worth? What is, and I think sometimes we don't, and I don't realize what my time is actually worth. Sometimes it just looks like a dollar amount. Well, how much would I make here or there versus, but this is also my time. So if you are sitting on the beach in Hawaii and now the next 2 or 3 days you're dealing with your HOA and the plumber and the HOA's plumber, and then your tenant and they're pissed and now they have to move out because it's not habitable. Be prepared for that. Because that's only one aspect of it. Making sure that maybe you have things set up from a bank account perspective, getting your, having your CPA really understand how to categorize all of the income on your income property. Or if you're out of state, understanding that in California as a property management company, we have to withhold a certain amount unless you're exempt. So there's like a whole world beyond, maintenance and this and that. It's like we're creating this pretty bow in this package and letting us do what we do really well. And then even giving you all your 1099, your cash flow report. So at the end of the year, you're like, here you go, CPA, boom. And then they can do it. And it's all like really great. All the way down to that, which is so different than the plumber handyman guy and make sure the rent's paid and that's it. And we're really that buffer. And sometimes we are that punching bag, which, we do. And we said we were going to do this and that's kind of, we are that buffer. And it's fun and it's exciting. And we have the staff that they're really up for it. And, we're the ones having to have those conversations that, for you might feel that you don't want to have, and really having your back, and being able to also be transparent and say, hey, listen, giving the tenant this rent credit at this time due to XYZ is really going to be in your favor. And the tenant's going to be really happy. And maybe they're going to stay another year. Or if we didn't, now there's like a contention. And that's not for our benefit. That's for our owner's benefit. And it doesn't happen often, but it's really also that business mindset that we bring as your partner to make recommendations that are really ultimately going to support you and, continue to maximize your investment property. That's why you hire us.
Oh, Chloe. I mean, I want the audience to hear it's your tribe, right? Or if it's your partnership team and whatever resonates with you, for you. I mean, really, honestly, I'm going to go out on a limb here and you got to start somewhere, so when you're obviously we're talking about real estate. So if real estate is an exit strategy for any kind of financial freedom plan, you have to start somewhere. And sometimes you don't always have every last dollar for every last thing. And something's got to give. Maybe you don't have a pool guy and a gardener but I venture to say that you scrimp and save somewhere else, but this is money well spent because you are, again, talking about something totally litigious. And by the way, you shouldn't scrimp and save on the other two things. But again, if you're starting tomorrow and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I just watched this video and now there's more stuff I have to deal with, that I assert, and I always push the people that are at least buying investment properties that I know. I mean, sometimes they have their own team of people, and
Yeah.
and you know, I like to bring up the conversation, but it's kind of like being a parent. You know, if somebody doesn't want to hear it, or they don't want to get involved in it, fine. Then something will break, or they'll be on vacation, and then they'll come crying to me, and it's fine, and we'll pick up the conversation. But the point is
Yeah.
that, you know, you didn't say this, but what I'm hearing you say underneath of it is that and the audience can tell if you've watched this entire episode, that you're not just your typical, we're going to fix it property manager, that you really are actually an aligned, provider, aligned team member. You're thinking ahead. You want the best for that client and their considered inanimate object, but you want that house to get as much depreciation over time without putting as much into it. And so there's a lot of physical and psychological factors, right? There's the hardware of the home, and then there's the people that are going to live in it. And yeah, I mean, guys, it's not getting any easier in the state of California. I'm sure nationwide people hear, how much of a pain in the butt it can be. It's more of a renter friendly state or whatever. But if you get the right people in the right place and do the right thing at the right time, I mean, you can't predict the future and how people are going to go when things go sideways.
Yeah.
You just want to keep some symbiosis going so that there are no sideways. Or if it does go sideways, you've got a mature, responsible professional in there that is most likely willing to negotiate. You're not dealing at, maybe somebody that just doesn't have the bandwidth or the wherewithal. And that's what I think a lot of people who want to get into real estate and have tenants fear. They feel like, oh my God, someone's going to put down liquid concrete down the pipes, or they're going to, take out all the copper from the walls. And, that's just not how most people operate. And people get into an upset, but that's not how they operate. So you're really a buffer. You are truly managing, or self-managing the asset so that you get ahead of something. So we're not in a litigious conversation, which is going to cost 3 times as more. Yeah,
exactly. And something that, yes, it's said a lot, California is a tenant friendly state, and that really it makes people afraid. And my perspective on that, when I hear that, is, if you're doing things the right way and the way that they're meant to be done, that shouldn't scare you. A lot of things that changed in legislations and things that have changed, a lot of that was due to increased homelessness, but also due to people coming out of COVID, rental property owners. They were upset with their tenants, pissed off, and they were just, you got to get out. And like cities like San Diego started cracking down. And a lot of the kind of the scare and the, we're doing this and we're changing this. I had, people would call me, and this change, the tenant protection ordinance that changed this past year in San Diego, didn't impact our business because we weren't lying about reasons why we were having tenants move out.
Wow,
there's little things that did change that do impact, but it's us, it's understanding and also working with we have a great, she's not on retainer, but we have an attorney. We ask her when things are not quite clear because of the whole litigious, like, we need to make sure that we're doing things the right way. So getting legal advice. I'm not an attorney. I'm not going to make things up and try to, figure this thing out. And so that doesn't scare me. And I think if you're partnered with the right kind of company, that shouldn't scare you either. And it's really in the inexperience, or sometimes things get emotional. I mean, I have people call me and that just say, hey, things have just gotten so emotional with my tenant that it's unbearable for me. Can you please step in? And it's as simple as that. They've gotten to a place where it's gone so south because they didn't do things. And then they're like, well, they're saying this and the tenant's saying that. And a lot of it's actually accurate. The tenant's actually accurate. It wasn't handled appropriately. And now you have someone digging in their feet because the rental property owner didn't handle things the way that legally it should, or just from a business perspective, would have a better outcome for that person, that owner, the owner. And I see it all. I mean, I see it all day long. So I think that that shouldn't scare you. And then something that I wanted to mention that I think is really valuable in what I'm seeing in this conversation is, even if you don't have property in San Diego or in LA or in California, and you're listening to this and you want to have a conversation about, hey, what should I look out for with property if I'm going to interview a property manager in, I don't know, New York or Florida or Texas or wherever, Seattle. Hey, can you just kind of talk to me about what are the things that I should watch out for? And I think that even so much so, me kind of creating some maybe like a guideline that I can share with people, because I think that's really valuable. And from an expert like myself that understands the insides of what to ask, that there's things that you might have a whole conversation that maybe a company isn't, they're not as transparent. They're not going to mention those things, but you don't even know what to ask. So it sounds really great, but then they forgot to tell you XYZ about how this is the process with this. And then when it comes down to it, now you had an expectation and it was, you were let down on whatever that is. So, I'm happy and available to that too, because I really genuinely love I love to share my knowledge. I share it with other property management companies here in San Diego. They call me for all sorts of things. And I really like that partnership, because then I know we're like, as a community, really kind of creating that same standard and really making sure that we're taking care of our people here in San Diego.
That is so beautiful. I mean, it's an adage that's running around with probably the Gen Zers or, younger millennials, which is collaboration over competition. I mean, I never grew up with that. I grew up in the 80s where it was like everyone was just out for themselves. I think they called it the me generation, like it got skipped over because it was only went on for 5 to 7 years, but it was a pathetic title. So it's not like a generation, right? It was just a time frame, but it definitely got, it was out there, it was all the big cars and flashy this and flashy that. You don't necessarily see that quite as much anymore. So the fact that people are willing to call you, I think says a lot about you. So even though people, as you mentioned, people can't do business with you because they might be in another state or another area, that you are making yourself accessible for the greater whole. So not only for property owners, and look, you're not in the business of giving free advice all the time, but I'm sure you have something that you can like send them off to, maybe a video or a link on your website or something. And we can put that in the show notes just as a conversation starter. Cause I'm a big fan of people empowering themselves and being efficient with other people's time. So if that doesn't answer your questions, then obviously call Chloe, and say, hey, I've got this burning desire question. Can you quick answer it for me? And now they've got the other 50 out of the way because you took the time to do something to help answer, the frequently asked questions, which is why I'm doing this series as well, not just with you, Chloe, but we're going to have an expert series so that folks can have a landing point, or I can say, hey, go watch Chloe's video first, and maybe it will conjure up some questions, because this is all about educating yourself, getting in the game, because it's a game of real estate and wealth building. Should be fun. And I think sometimes some of these television shows, especially that highlight more of the agents, right? But the Bravo TVs and the Netflix and stuff like that, the people are very wowed by the numbers. They're wowed by the commissions. They're wowed by the cost of the properties. They're wowed by what the property looks like. And those are not necessarily, obviously, investment properties, although some of those shows on Bravo are like a flip or flop type of thing. But there's a lot to consider, and you want to educate yourself. And I swear the world is just getting more and more litigious by the second. You don't have enough hours in the day to be your own lawyer. So that's why we're bringing this series. That's why, Chloe, as a professional, is out here in the world who truly cares, and wants people to see do right by the industry and do right by their investments. So I just appreciate who you are. We barely scratched the surface. Is there something that you would want to say aside from, that was going to be a question I was going to ask, is something that's kind of like the greater whole of people, like where to start. I always like to leave people with the next actionable step, but is there something else that maybe is the brighter side? Two questions: the brighter side of why you like doing this, because we heard why you got into, but why you like doing this, and maybe also something that just to, I don't want to say warn people, because you want to empower people to get educated, but what's the biggest question that keeps showing up that you wish people would just have their own answer to?
So I'll start with that first. So I think the biggest question that I get that it would be something in the realm of, is it worth hiring a property manager?
Okay.
And I think that's just like really on a case by case and what kind of, what does your life look like? You mentioned a lot about financial freedom to be in your life and do the things that you love and your hobbies and get your money in your bank account.
Mm-hmm.
In my opinion, doesn't look like managing and dealing with resident questions and clogged toilets and lease renewals, etc. And it could, someone, could be very passionate about that. So I would say that is probably, something that would be great, because I don't always have an hour to sit and talk about what the value is. And I, can do a consultation in 15-20 minutes. So, yeah. But it's that value proposition, I would think it's really important for people to understand. And then the bright side of it all.
Yeah.
I really love educating people in something that I know so much about. And I educated myself about it. I wasn't necessarily like sat through a class of, property management 101. Yes, I'm licensed. I've gone to the conferences. I'm continuing to educate myself 100%. But a lot of my knowledge is because I've been there and I've done it. And that's really what I love. I mean, an hour ago, I was on the phone with the property manager asking me like, hey, how did you build your network of, broker partners and this and that? And I love when I get those conversations, because I equally love to be able to call my other property management partner and said, hey, we're dealing with X. Have you guys dealt with this? What could you, provide? And mostly with my agent partners. I mean, I work with hundreds of agents in San Diego that their clients looking to purchase an investment property, their clients looking at them, well, what can I rent it for? And my top thing is, do not tell your client what that property can rent for. Do not tell them, because do you know 100% what it can, like, where are you getting your resources? So I am that resource to my agent community here in San Diego. They can send me the address. I'll put together an analysis. I will, say, hey, here's like a range based on me knowing if that came across my desk, that I would be able to fill that property within that, say $200, rental projection range.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love being a resource, and whether a client comes on board with me or not, that I am really there to educate and provide all the information. And then you decide for yourself. You have to choose for yourself, hey, I either going to do this or not. And that's really where I come from in my perspective. So for me, I love doing that. I think it's really fun. It's really great. And I love connecting with people, and it's fun. And I think it's a very, for me, when I say a niche market, it's like my community is surrounded around real estate, but it really is an industry that most people don't know the ins and outs. And I like to be able to be that resource for people and support them.
I love that. I mean, that's the part where it's knowing that somebody has your back on the stuff that is maybe in the trenches. It's not the fun stuff. It's not the person that's going to come and do all the designer things, or the landscaper, or the pool architect. This is the down and dirty. But listen, if you don't, it's like, it's a pay now or pay later policy. It's kind of like your health. If you don't take care of your asset, it's not going to take care of you, including the people that are in it. And so you might be able to, quote unquote, get away with it. If I use the food analogy again, like if you eat poorly for years and years, and then at some point there's going to be a tipping point. And that's the same thing with homes. It's going to be the roof. It's going to be this, it's going to be that. I mean, at some point things will have to be replaced, right? But if you don't take care of it along the way, there's just an example. If you don't take care of it along the way, it will not take care of you. And then you're going to point at it and say, real estate stinks, and I wish I didn't invest in real estate. No. I mean, there's other moving parts, of course, to that comment, but usually if it comes to the property management component and you don't have the right person in the right place and you're not doing the right things for the right property, then it's a ticking time bomb. So I do want the audience to know that, sure, can you get away with it for a little while you maybe don't have the budget for it? Sure. It's not a tomorrow thing, unless you buy a house that's already in dilapidated condition, and then you wouldn't necessarily have a property manager. You'd be fixing it up. So you see where this is is going, right? But I just, again, people get very wound up. There's a lot of FOMO out there. There's an overabundance of information and a lack of action. And so if you are at that point where you're like, hey, I'm doing the thing, you call up someone like Chloe that's running an Integris business, and you get yourself educated, and you just make a decision, and it is money well spent. And that's it. It's the cost of doing business. Otherwise, wait or don't get in. I mean, really, I've 19 years of being an agent and an agent investor and working with investors. It's the same saga over and over again. It's like a new generation of people doing things the same way all over again. And I'm like, oh my God, I feel like the parent in the corner going, I told you so, but we're still just the educators, So I appreciate you. Any parting words, anything else that you might want to say before we go? Because we're going to have you back on. So this is it.
No, this is great. I love being on. I love to educate different types of people, whether it's my agent community or an investor, first time, seasoned, all that kind of jazz. If you've had a bad experience with property management, before Renee and I even got on, it was to really, know that the industry doesn't have the best reputation, and there are a lot of companies out there that are running great businesses that are committed, and they're doing it with integrity, and you really deserve that type of service, and you can expect that. So not falling into the pitfall of, well, that's just property management.
Yeah.
I created this business to say, no, this can be different. And when we first started, our kind of tagline was disrupting the property management industry. And that's really what we're here to do. And, having all companies really see that there's an opportunity to do that. So thanks for having me. It's been great.
Yes. How do they find you? I know you've got the name in the background, but just if there's a dedicated line for you, or just an initial velvet rope to get past you, and any of the things, I'll put it in the show notes, but you're welcome to say the number now if you'd like.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So Chloe Brown, Bridge House Property Managers. You can visit our website. You can see this little thing. So that's Bridge House, HAUS, propertymanagers.com. Or you can email me, Chloe at Bridgehouse, P as in Paul, M as in Mary.com. And our phone number is 619-940-6845. And if you want to get me directly, just hit 3 and I will answer all your property management inquiry questions.
There it is, number 3. So Chloe, I appreciate you. Known you for some time. I appreciate you as a friend, and I also appreciate you as a professional. So thank you for putting the good word as, locking arms. I mean, I might be doing more of the sales side of things and finding properties, and you're obviously managing them. That's why they call you a property manager. But I consider us all kind of kumbayaing together. When you find your people, it's so important to do business. Good people find good people. And remember that, when you're purchasing property. So Chloe, we'll have you on at another time. If anybody has questions or concerns, you guys can get at me in the comments, or Chloe left her information, and you go direct there and just let her know that you will watch the show. So I appreciate everybody. And Chloe, we'll see you soon.
Awesome. Bye. Thank you.